everyone, my name is Sammy V and you're watching me. Happy New Year. I hope everyone has had a great start to 2022. For this year, I wanted to start off with a quick little video of writing tips and tricks that I've learned through my entire little experience of writing. Now, I have absolutely loved creative writing and storytelling ever since, I was able to do it. Ever since I've been able to read and write, I've been making like little stories, sharing it with people, and I published a book when I was in high school, when I was in 11th grade. So I have a couple of things that I would like to share. The baseline, the very first thing that you have to overcome first is that you kind of have to unlearn some of the stuff that we were taught in school. So, not starting with contractions, not starting with the fanboys, the for and but. You can't use like run-on sentences or fragments. That's actually not true. One of the most, fun parts of writing is being able to play around with the style a little bit, being able to, vary your sentence length. And sometimes that means just not even writing a complete sentence, depending on what the tone and what the mood of that certain scene is. Of course, this means that you have to understand the rules before you can break them, right? But once you do have that baseline kind of educational, like high school, middle school type of writing information that a teacher will tell you, it's when you can like experiment and play with the styles. Tips 2 and 3 go together. It's rethink your synonyms and pick out the verbs to convey the proper tone. So when it comes to synonyms, each one has a different connotation, right? So let's say you're trying to write a scary scene. What kind of exclamation verb would you use? Would you use, got my little notes here, yelped, shrieked, or bellowed? Now, yelped to me is usually used in a more humorous context or a more like lighthearted sort of mood. So like a man yelping because someone like stepped on his toe. Shrieked is definitely more so aligned with that fear, horror movie type of this like shrill, violent scream. And bellowed also doesn't really give off that, it doesn't give off that horror mood. And yeah, you wouldn't want to use that type of verb. So just really think about not just the adjectives and the synonyms that come with it, but also like your verb style. I really want you to rethink what kind of synonyms you're using for your, not only your adjectives, but also for your verbs. Make sure they're conveying the right tone for that scene. So if you're doing something humorous, if you're doing something scary, if you're doing something kind of melodramatic and kind of dry, make sure that you have the proper verbs that fit with each of those scenes. This one is so important. Everybody, please listen to this. Read your dialogue specifically out loud. It helps you find mistakes, first of all, but also it helps you see how awkward or jumbled, muddled, or confused your wording can be. When you read something out loud, you're able to slow down, see all of the mistakes, and really act out all the different parts of your scene. It's really important to do this with dialogue because I have read quite a few people's like dialogue scenes, and they just sound very inauthentic, a little bit robotic. And another aspect of dialogue that you want to pay attention to is that sometimes you don't need to have a whole lot of dialogue. Oh, sorry, my dog just walked in. Sometimes you just have to let dialogue, Larry. Sometimes you just have to let dialogue speak for itself. You don't need to have a whole lot of, he smirked and he stood up. Like some lines, you can just have it straight up just be speaking, then add in some actions. It doesn't have to be an action every single like line. I'd like to read an example from one of my works, something that I'm working on right now called this book has a lot of dialogue, right? And I'm constantly reading it out loud. I probably sound like a crazy person, like mumbling to myself. Here's a little excerpt, okay? The being put a hand on Santon's face with that unreadable look still obscuring his emotions. If I do, I might forget that I feel anything for you, and you cannot be around me when that happens. Before I vanish, how you know me, you have to be far from me. Have you finished your writings yet? May I read them now? What? Amala laughed again, now just barely the sound of a breath, a pained inhale. I can hear you mumbling your words aloud in the slow scratches of the pen against parchment. I know that you have been writing all the time you have been here, ever since you first arrived, have you not? What do you mean you won't feel anything from me? Is it reasonable to guess that you will not let me read it at all now? Do you mean you'll forget me? Amala sat up straight and sank back on his heels. So you can see that a couple of those lines, I didn't put really any dialogue tags there, right? It was just letting the lines kind of stack up one after the other. And you don't have to keep clarifying who's saying what because it should be fairly obvious. That one is a big one. Please read everything you write out loud, whether you're editing or whether you're just, in the process of writing. Read it out loud. It can help you tremendously in trying to improve what you're trying to say. Finally, I want you all to write from personal experiences and your feelings. Sometimes I read people's works and they say things like, he was sad, right? Or some variation of that. That's not how you create a sensory reading experience for your audience, for your reader. You have to pull from the experiences in your life. You don't have to say what they were, but you have to convey the emotions and the feelings that you had in that moment and put it into what you write. It makes it so much more powerful, and you can apply this not to just creative writing, but also to personal essays for when you're applying to colleges, into essays that you have to write when you're in college or when you're in high school or middle school. It is so important to really just be honest with yourself. Writing is a really important tool to showcase your humanity. I want you all to get a little bit of an idea of what I mean by not just saying, stating what a person is feeling and kind of just building a entire sensory experience around it. I have a little excerpt here. Soon the time had come to accept the reality of his failure, the gravity of his loss. He admitted this defeat some long stretch of time later, when the skies were still dark and sunless and spiraling in gray human matter. He collapsed, sank to the feet of the fractured being, pressed his head into the ground, clasped his hands over his brittle hair, and without any awareness of himself and without any guilt, he stopped withholding what had been groomed to silence, and he cried until his tears absorbed into the dirtless ground, and the ache within him became too strong for him to believe he was ever living. Now compare that to if I just said he was sad. I hope that was informative for you all. I really want you all to apply some of these tips into your own writing if you're looking to improve. You will see, honestly, if you didn't get anything from this video, just read your stuff out loud, please. Please. So I don't have to be the one to, feel awkward when I'm trying to read your little dialogue moment and it's, it's a hot mess. Anyway. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great night.